What if I told you the tension between boomers and Gen Z isn't about laziness or entitlement, but something much deeper? Let's settle the score and uncover the real story behind this generational feud. Does it sound familiar? Gen Z blames boomers for housing costs, climate change, and crushing student debt. And meanwhile, boomers fire back with Gen Z is lazy and entitled. But is any of that really true? Or are we stuck in the same tired blame game? And are we being manipulated by social media to fuel engagement and enragement? Stick with me, because we'll break down the stereotypes, frustrations, and what we can learn from each other. Hey there, friends. I'm Steve, your friendly neighborhood boomer, and I've spent decades learning, teaching, helping people, and flying search and rescue missions. Think of me as your second or maybe your third favorite grandfather with a YouTube channel. This is Old Guy Insights, where we tackle life's big questions, share lessons, and maybe even laugh along the way. If you're enjoying this discussion or you think I'm totally off base, don't be shy. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And you can always drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. There's always more information on the show page that I didn't have an opportunity or a place to include here. But if you visit the page for this show on my site, oldguyinsights.me, that's me. You can find all that information there. Today we're diving into the generational divide between boomers and Gen Z. And I'm going to tackle questions like, are boomers to blame for Gen Z's struggles? What systemic changes have shaped today's challenges? How can these two generations understand each other better? And what boomers heard as kids from their parents? I think that'll make you chuckle. But we're also digging deeper into why each generation views the other and the world so differently. Spoiler alert, there's actually some fascinating psychological biases that make the past seem rosy and the present feel tougher than it is. There's science behind that. And by the end of this conversation, my hope is that you'll walk away with a fresh perspective and maybe even a little more empathy for the other side. Let's get to it. Let's meet Jake and Bob. Jake's Gen Z. Bob, your generation set us up to fail. You had cheap homes, affordable college, stable jobs, and now? Dude, I'm drowning in debt, paying outrageous rent, and can't even dream of owning a home. And don't even get me started on the planet you wrecked. Bob, our boomer. Jake, I get your frustration, but this mess isn't just on boomers. Every generation between mine and yours played a part in shaping today's realities. Plus, once something becomes the norm, like fast fashion, food delivery, same-day shipping, people resist giving it up, even if it's part of the problem. Jake says, okay, but if everyone knows these systems are broken, why hasn't anyone fixed them? How are we supposed to make real change when the system's stacked against us? Bob says, that's the hard part, Jake. Real change takes intervention, big, systemic action. But in a world where people demand smaller government and fewer programs, how does anyone expect to tackle huge issues like housing, healthcare, or climate change without strong institutions and collective effort? Let's define the players here. Baby boomers, or boomers, were born between 1946 and 1964. We grew up in a post-war economic boom, witnessed the moon landing, and lived through major societal changes like the civil rights movement. Generation Z, or Gen Z, includes those born after 1997. This year, for the first time, Gen Z is expected to outnumber boomers in the workforce. They bring new attitudes towards work management and the balance between life and career. Boomers often saw work as a way to provide for their family. Gen Z focuses more on working to live, which is a healthier mindset. But here's the catch. Gen Zers feel the American dream is no longer achievable through hard work alone, and they're not wrong. Boomers had pensions and job stability. Over time, the burden shifted to employees with 401ks replacing pensions, and job security taking a back seat. These systemic shifts shaped the financial landscape Gen Z faces today. Let's look at some boomer stereotypes. Out of touch, resistant to change, and hoarders of wealth. Dismissive of new technology, labeling it as a distraction. And Gen Z stereotypes? Lazy, entitled, glued to their phones, overly sensitive, and driven by cancel culture. Social media amplifies these stereotypes. Platforms like TikTok and Facebook thrive on engagement through enragement, turning generational memes into viral conflicts. I mean, remember those okay boomer jokes? They might be funny, but they widen the gap and shrink empathy. The result? Both sides dig in, convinced that the other doesn't understand their struggles. Let's break through these stereotypes by looking at the real challenges each generation faces. Let's dive into some of the complaints that I've heard from Gen Z about boomers. Complaint number 1, I have boomer parents, and frankly, my relationship with them is anything but close. I find them to be egotistical, prideful, always think they're right, more concerned with their own image, status, and how others perceive them than how their children actually feel. You know, this isn't a boomer problem. This is a bad parenting problem. Parents across generations have fallen into the bandwagon effect, prioritizing appearances over genuine connection. It's worth starting honest conversations about what you need from the relationships. Complaint number 2. And the boomers become judgmental, calling us lazy when we're commuting 3 hours a day for jobs that barely keep our heads above water, with no benefits or security, all temp work. I hear you. The job market has shifted dramatically. Boomers often had stable jobs with benefits, while Gen Z faces a gig economy with few safety nets. Calling Gen Z lazy misses the point. It's not about effort, it's about opportunity. Here's another complaint. I don't like baby boomers because of the powerful interests that control the United States. They own all of the media. They keep us divided on social issues to distract us from the problems that affect their income and investments. That's a bold statement. It might not be far off, but division sells. Social media and corporate interest thrive on conflict because it drives engagement and profits. But let's not blame boomers entirely. These systems evolved over decades. Recognizing manipulation is the first step towards breaking free from it. Here's another complaint. There's a lack of awareness by Gen Zers that they're being manipulated by marketers to develop generational hate and animosity towards boomers. Well, that's true, and here's the thing. Social media feeds on outrage, and the more frustrated you are, the more you engage, and that's profitable for the platforms. But remember, generational hate isn't reality. It's a tool that divides us, and we can rise above it and focus on what we can fix together. So why do boomers often romanticize the past while Gen Z feels like the present is uniquely terrible? It's not just about nostalgia, it's about how our brains work. Psychologists call this the rosy retrospection bias. We're wired to remember the good stuff and minimize the bad. Boomers recall affordable homes, family dinners, and steady jobs. forgetting inflation, the Cold War, and limited social freedoms. And on the flip side, the negativity bias makes today's challenges feel overwhelming. Gen Z faces student debt, climate change, anxiety, and a gig economy, so it's natural to focus on what feels broken. Recognizing these biases helps us see that both generations face real struggles, and both have their share of triumphs. You know, Gen Z, you're not the first generation to feel misunderstood. No. When boomers like me were growing up, we heard plenty of complaints from our parents. And let me tell you, we thought they were being just as unreasonable as you think we are now. I mean, here's some of the greatest hits from the greatest generation and the silent generation that we heard. You don't know the value of hard work. Our parents lived through the Great Depression and World War II, so they couldn't fathom why we didn't appreciate the cushier post-war economy. To them, mowing lawns for pocket money didn't compare to rationing food and working in factories. You're way too rebellious and don't appreciate things. The 1960s and 70s were wild. I mean, civil rights marches, anti-war protests, hippies, and rock and roll. To our parents, we weren't changing the world, we were tearing it apart.
What do you think about the guys marching all vexed? They've all been there.
They look like a bunch of punks to me.
No, these guys are all doing that.
Oh, yeah, I know. My kid was there, too.
They got a right.
They have. Sure, they got it right. Let them go.
Can you imagine them being in the Army? If I was the first sergeant, they go in the guard house till they got cleaned up. There's the whole thing in this country. Respect for law and order, respect for the uniform and the military is broken down completely.
They don't like this. Why don't they go back to Hanoi?
You're wasting your time on that music. Our parents were baffled by our obsession with Elvis, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin. To them, rock and roll was just noise, nothing like the wholesome big band music of their youth. You're spending money like it grows on trees. Yeah, we did have access to things they never did. TVs, cars, fashion. And we loved spending on them. To our parents, this was pure extravagance, and they were sure that we'd never learn the value of a dollar. You're too soft and pampered. I mean, yeah, we were growing up without the hardships they faced, and they saw us as spoiled and ungrateful and untested by life. You don't respect tradition. You know, we questioned everything. Marriage, religion, politics. To them, we were dismantling the moral foundation of society. Sound familiar? You're always glued to that TV. Yeah, I mean, even the boob tube was a source of intergenerational friction. They worried it would rot our brains, and now we say the same about phones and TikTok. Back then, we thought they didn't understand us or our world. I mean, how could they? Things were so different now, and guess what? We were right, and they didn't understand us. But here's the twist. The very same complaints they had about us are the ones we now throw at Gen Z. The cycle continues, and each generation feels misunderstood. The lesson? Every generation thinks their struggles are unique, and their parents just don't get it. But the truth is, the generational divide isn't new. It's just wearing different clothes and listening to different music. Let's break down the financial disparities. Housing costs. In 1980, a median home cost $47,200, about $163,000 in today's dollars. Now it's over $400,000. Education costs. Boomers graduated debt-free because tuition was affordable and there were no student loans. Gen Z faces tuition that's tripled, often leaving them with massive loans. Monthly expenses. Boomers had one phone bill. Gen Z juggles cell bills, streaming services, and constant tech upgrades. eating out and groceries. Boomers cooked at home. Their parents did. Gen Z relies on DoorDash and Instacart, paying for convenience. Coffee costs. Boomers brewed at home for pennies, and Gen Z spends $5 per Starbucks, adding up to $150 or more a month. The result? Gen Z is navigating a more expensive world with fewer financial footholds. It's easy to point fingers, but the truth is complex. Economic policies, deregulation and globalization widened income inequality. Housing market speculation, real estate booms and limited construction drive prices up. Education funding cuts, reduced public funding shifted tuition costs to students. Climate crisis, industrial growth left environmental damage for future generations. While boomers played a role, these challenges are systemic, spanning decades and multiple generations. Since the early 1980s, wages have stagnated even as productivity soared. Boomers could stretch their paychecks further because the cost of living was lower relative to income. Gen Z, however, faces stagnant wages alongside skyrocketing housing, healthcare, and education costs. Take gas prices. In 1980, a gallon of gas was about $1.19, around $4.35 in today's dollars. Cars back then got 15 miles per gallon compared to today's 25 miles per gallon. While fuel economy improved, the overall cost of owning a car, including insurance, repairs, parking, and all the technology, has risen significantly. I remember filling up my old used car for $10 and feeling like a king. Gen Z, they're paying $75 per tank, and that's before their $5 Starbucks fix. Now, it's the same with housing. A single income could buy a home in the 1980s, while today, even two incomes often fall short. It's no wonder that Gen Z feels like they're running on a treadmill going nowhere. Financial struggles don't just hurt your wallet, they weigh heavily on your mental health. Boomers faced their own stressors like high inflation, job competition, but they often had clear paths to stability. Gen Z, however, faces constant uncertainty, juggling student loans, rent, and unstable jobs in a gig economy. The result? Rising rates of anxiety and depression and burnout. It's tough to plan for the future when just surviving the present feels like a full-time job. Here's something I've noticed over the years. Fewer people are seeking out mentors. Back in the day, mentorship was a key way to learn from someone else's hard-earned wisdom and avoid mistakes. Today, with Google at our fingertips, that personal connection is often overlooked. But it's a missed opportunity. Boomers bring decades of experience, while Gen Z offers fresh ideas and tech-savvy solutions. Together, we could tackle today's challenges more effectively. Instead of pointing fingers, let's start sharing knowledge. After all, wisdom and innovation are a powerful team. It's easy to get caught up in the blame game, but here's the truth. Neither boomers nor Gen Z has it all figured out. We're just products of our times. Boomers had their battles, civil rights, gender equality, and the Cold War. Gen Z faces new ones, climate change, student debt, and an evolving digital economy. These struggles may look different, but the core challenge is the same: navigating a world in flux. What's tough for boomers to truly grasp is the weight of Gen Z's reality. But here's a thought. 40 years from now, Gen Z will be the ones future generations blame for their problems. That's just how this works. Each generation builds the world they pass on, for better or for worse. So how do we stop this endless cycle of blame? By focusing on what we can control and work together to solve the real issues. Boomers, share your wisdom without dismissing Gen Z's struggles. Listen and adapt, just as we did in our youth. And Gen Z, recognize that not all boomers are stuck in their ways. Many fought for change, and some are still fighting alongside you. Let's shift this conversation from who's to blame to how can we fix this? Together, we can challenge broken systems and create a future that works for everyone. Blaming boomers for Gen Z's struggles is like blaming yesterday's driver for today's traffic jam. Sure, the choices played a role, but the problem's bigger than any one generation. The good news? Once we stop pointing fingers, we can start making progress. Here's the big takeaway. Every generation had its triumphs and its failures. The key is to learn from each other's experiences and work collectively to build a better future. Ultimately, life isn't about who had it easier or harder. It's about what we do with the cards we're dealt. Boomers, Gen Z, millennials, and everyone in between, we're all part of the same story. The chapters may look different, but the plot is the same, adapting to a rapidly changing world. By focusing on empathy, understanding, and collaboration, we can bridge the generational gap and tackle today's challenges head on. What do you think? Are boomers really to blame, or are we all just trying to navigate a world that's constantly shifting under our feet? Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this discussion, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. And don't forget to visit oldguyinsights.me. That's me. For more information in the show notes that I just couldn't include here. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and remember, the best way to move forward is together. See ya.